Buongiorno everybody, and welcome to another day in Rome, another beautiful day. It's quite stormy here, so I thought I'd just take you for a quick little mini tour around the Colosseum today. The weather may not cooperate, but I thought since I'm here I may as well hop on and just sort of give you a little bit of a sample, a little feeling for Rome. Many of you have probably been here before, but it's kind of interesting to see what it's like right now with so few crowds, because most people who've been here have seen the Colosseum and the Forum with immense crowds. So I thought what I'd do is just take a little lap around the Colosseum and the Arch of Constantine and talk a little bit about what you see. And yeah, we'll just see how this goes. This is one of my many experiments in doing virtual tours. How do we bring tourism to you? How can we bring travel to you in a time when you can't come to travel? So first things first, let's do a quick pan. This is the Arch of Constantine. Constantine is probably my favorite emperor. I'll tell you about him in just a little bit. And then we have the Colosseum, which is actually the Flavian Amphitheater, called the Colosseum because right here in the past, there was an enormous statue, probably this tall, right? And that was of Nero originally, and they later changed it to the Colossus in front of the Colosseum. And so the Flavian Amphitheater was then nicknamed Colosseum for the giant statue. It was a sun god. And then over here, we have the entrance to the Forum. So I hope it's not too windy, and it is a little stormy, so I'm not sure how long we'll be able to walk without getting rained on here. But I think I want to take you over and show you a little bit about the Colosseum. So the Colosseum is probably the Roman building you know best, even better than the Pantheon, even better than any of the palaces or famous buildings of Roman times. This is, I think, in our imaginations, the most famous, the most prestigious. And this is an amphitheater, and it is a place where, of course, they did gladiator battles. But what I think is truly remarkable about this place more than anything is that it was built almost 2,000 years ago and is still generally standing. So this was built by the Flavian family, Vespasian, around the time that Pompeii erupted. So think about that. That was around 79 AD. So this is pretty much contemporary, opened 80 AD. To great fanfare. And really the Colosseum is a place you have to liken it, of course, to sports stadiums. And it functioned very much like a sports stadium in that there was not always an event going on all the time. Events took place only when the emperors wanted to throw them, like big festivals, and the emperors paid for them, so they couldn't do them every single day of the week. The first thing you may notice, we need to start by reading our ruins. Reading our ruins is the most important part of getting to know Rome, because it's so difficult to know if what you're seeing is authentic or if it's a reconstruction. There were a lot of reconstructions done in the 19th century and also during the fascist period with Mussolini in the 1930s that completely changed the way buildings were interpreted. Some of the restorations were too similar to things that should have been in the past. So it's important to take a look and start by looking at your ruins and trying to understand what is original and what isn't. So this is a good angle to start from, because you can see immediately there's a big difference between the stones and the bricks. And then over here you can also see the outer shell. So it's easy to understand immediately that we're missing something. And if you look on the ground right here, you can see a line. And that line is meant to mark where the original outer shell of the Colosseum would have been. That outer shell collapsed. And it was during the time that they were building St. Peter's, more or less. So 1600s, the outer shell, there was an earthquake and it collapsed. And then they just carted the travertine away and used it for other things. So we know for sure that we're missing an outer shell. But then if we want to read the ruins on the inside, what we can immediately see is these are smooth looking bricks, right? So you can tell immediately those are a restoration. Those are meant to hold up the travertine stones right there, right? And then up above, you can also see that there are some bricks that look a different color, right? But those are maybe not quite as new as these. So by looking at the different colors of bricks and how smooth they are, if they're very smooth like that, you know that they're almost brand new. And if they're thin and sort of battered, those ones you know are going to be more original. You can also see in this point of view a little bit about how the Colosseum is constructed, because you see up here, you can see cement. So the walls, it's not entirely travertine. It's actually travertine like is the skeleton, right? That's the white stone. And then we have a brick structure on the inside, and the bricks are like a sandwich, right? They're making a sandwich, and then in between is like a cement with stone. So that's how it's put together, and it's held up for a very long time. It actually was a very intelligent system of building, because the travertine stones were pinned together, kind of like Lego blocks. Think of them like Lego blocks. Inside, you can't see them, but there was a pin on the inside. So when they put the blocks on top of each other, those blocks would stay together. And of course, they knew that they had earthquakes in this area. This is a volcanic peninsula, of course, and there's a lot of movement. So that is one of the reasons that they did that. Now, you see all the pockmarks. A lot of you probably know this, but the pockmarks there are from a later time in the Middle Ages, when people came here to the Colosseum. They saw it as a stone quarry, as a quarry for materials to build other things. Some of the stone from this building was repurposed and used to build the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica. So it's called elegant recycling in my mind. They just elegantly recycle things. But these people in the Middle Ages who had no appreciation for this building would come here, and they would use explosives and chisels and things like that and make holes in the side, because they knew that those pins holding the blocks together were made of iron, and iron was worth something. So desperate people, you can imagine, crawling all over the Colosseum. Look how dangerous that had to be, crawling up there, to be able to dig a little bit of metal, scrap metal, out of the Colosseum so that they could live on that. Also, during that time, you can see some other kinds of marks. You see horizontal marks like this one here. Those horizontal marks are often from where people had made structures. The lower arcades of the Colosseum during the Middle Ages especially were like a house. People built their homes inside there, kind of like a homeless camp. So the Colosseum has been repurposed and reused for many things over time. But as I said, the original use was as a stadium for the different games of the Romans. And really, these games are done sort of for political reasons. They did them because they wanted to impress the locals. You know, it's sort of like a political candidate throwing a party. You know, how do you sort of bribe people? How do you get people to like you? So this was a really good way to get everybody in one place, and to be generous and be kind and look good as a politician. So this was really like a propaganda building. And the thing that I find interesting, and I relate this to a lot, is when you look at the buildings of Mussolini from the 1930s, they have similar scale and similar architectural language, because they were built for the same purpose, which is political propaganda. You know, his message was different. The Romans' message was, be careful, you're very small and we're very big. Whereas Mussolini's message was, be careful because I am the reincarnation of those Romans. So let's have a look right here at the entrance. Basically nobody at the entrance today. Typically this is a mob scene. You know, it occurred to me today as I was walking around here that, you know, I'm down here with a mask and my hand sanitizer, and I'm keeping distant from people. I can't imagine, I have a hard time imagining, that even a year from now, people are going to feel comfortable getting back in those crowds we saw a year ago. So I don't know what's going to happen with big sites like this, but virtual tours are maybe a better way about it. So here's our entry here. And from here, what I wanted to show you is this is the original facade of the Colosseum, right? You can see we have three orders of columns: the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. But those columns don't hold anything up. They are purely decorative. And that is the way you tell the difference, or I suppose it is the big difference between Greek architecture and Roman architecture. The Romans used columns a lot of times just as decorative elements, but their structures were mostly made of brick. So this is primarily a brick structure with concrete on the inside, and the exterior is this travertine stone. Now travertine you may have seen like in fancy bathrooms. but it's actually a fairly common material here in Italy, and you can get it at a quarry just outside of Rome. So there you go. That's travertine, sort of creamy, and it's got a lot of pores in it. And the problem is those pores are like a sponge, and that's why over time the Colosseum has gotten so dark. There's a big road around here, and that has caused it to get dirty over time, but lucky us, we're seeing it at its most beautiful. It has been recently restored. So this is potentially the cleanest you're ever going to see the Colosseum in your lifetime. So since it's a stadium, one of the most important aspects that most people don't notice is there are doors. Look at that. There's a door with a number on it. So if you were to come here to an event, you would receive a ticket, and that ticket would have a door number on it. You'd go in that door just like a modern stadium. You'd walk in and you would find your seat. And that's how you would get in. And they say, and who knows, but there are estimates of between 50 and 80,000 spectators who could have been in the Colosseum at any one time. And the crazy thing is that they have estimated also that those 50 to 80,000 people could have exited this building in a half an hour. Now think about your baseball stadium in your home. Think about anything that any kind of large venue. It takes a heck of a lot longer than a half an hour to get everybody out. And I think about when I was an architect, all the exiting requirements, but these people, they had a genius about them. They figured out how to make a building so efficiently designed with circulation, they could get people in and get people out. But they also had another reason, because these numbers corresponded, of course, to different parts of the Colosseum on the inside. And that, if you went into a certain door, you would definitely not meet other social classes. So that was a way to divide the social classes and keep the peace. So, you wouldn't be sitting with, some guy who lives in a hut if you were a patrician. We went in a special door. So the genius of this is really one of the more impressive things. It was also built so fast. It was built in less than a decade, and they did it by having 4 different construction teams. They built it kind of divided into quarters, and all of the quarters went up simultaneously. A lot of people say it was slaves that built it, and while maybe slaves helped, slaves certainly did not have the skills to do something this intelligent. So definitely these emperors, who were actually new, this family was new, and they were from Africa, they wanted to impress the locals. And so they paid a lot of this out of their pocket, and they brought in good workers and architects who knew what they were doing. I mean, there's no way that slaves would have just magically built something this complex. So I'm going to just walk around the back a little bit. You can pretend you're with me. It's about, I would say, 80 degrees, 85 degrees, and windy, and there's a big storm brewing. Hey, we can get a little closer here. I'm not going to go in today. I've been into the Colosseum about 20,000 times in my life, so I'm going to take a pass on that. But look up, you can see how beautiful. The craftsmanship, I mean, this one here is really deteriorated, but even so, you can see how beautiful and precise the cuts are on all of this stone. So highly skilled craftsmen and a beautiful building. Now, of course, we all know about gladiator fights. We also know that there potentially were hunts where you'd have teams of people hunting animals on the floor. And there's a lot of speculation about how they kept the animals on the floor. I guess they had these big nets with rollers, so if the lions would try to climb out, they'd roll back down. But they would go and hunt exotic animals from all over Africa and as far as the Roman Empire could reach, and they'd bring these animals back here. And really, when you think about it, people who lived back then had never seen exotic animals. So this hunt was probably, for the people here in Rome, almost equally as exciting, or maybe more so in some ways, than the gladiator battles themselves, because they could see things that were wonders, things that you'd never seen before, magical animals from all over the world. But this was also a political statement. Think about that. The political statement is, look at the reach of the Roman Empire. Look how far we can go. We can bring you animals that you didn't even know existed. So it's all about politics, and it's all about showing off the power of ancient Rome. So in this place, of course, we also had the famous gladiator battles. We're getting a little rain. I might have to go inside. The gladiators were a lot like boxers or athletes who compete one-on-one, and they would compete in matches, and they would be hyped, they would be advertised, and people would be fans, you know. So did every gladiator die in every battle? Definitely not. Some of the things I've read have said that many of the gladiators didn't actually die in battle, but they died of their wounds later by getting gangrene or whatever. So you can't think of them in the way that you see it in the movie Gladiator. It's not always fighting to the death, because the people who owned these slaves who were gladiators put a lot of money into training them. You wouldn't want to send somebody you spent tons of money on into battle assuming that they're just going to die. So there's a little different idea about it. And here's another idea that we have that's a little bit wrong. You can see inside a cross, and that's a very famous monument that's inside of the Colosseum, put up there to remember the Christian martyrs who were killed in the Colosseum. That's not correct. That wasn't a typical thing. They didn't do martyrdoms in the Colosseum typically, at least that's not what modern historians think. They often used the people who were slaves, they might have been Christians, to take care of the animals and help with the show. And those people could have been eaten by the lions in tending them. They did, of course, do horrific things to the Christians, but that didn't typically take place here. That took place in another stadium on the edges of Rome. So here's a nice little shot into the Colosseum today. Almost no crowds. So that's just a little bit about the Colosseum. Over here across the street, this is something maybe you've never noticed if you've been here. There's a hill, and there are some ruins. Now, going across the street to the ruins here, and if you look beyond, there's a piazza over here. These were all sort of buildings that were likely associated with the Colosseum. The ones over here were probably a gladiator school. So that's likely where the gladiators lived and trained. And then what you're looking at right here, this piazza, underneath it was a tunnel. So right here, imagine there's a tunnel under there leading people from the gladiator school into the Colosseum. So the slaves who were gladiators wouldn't have any opportunity to escape, but they'd also sort of pop up magically in the stadium. So there's a lot of associated buildings that are on the outskirts. Just an atmospheric thing. If you would have been here during the age of the gladiator duels and all of that, you would have behaved similar to the way you behave at a baseball stadium, because they had snacks. And apparently the big snack was chicken. And they have found in these areas kind of around here doing excavations, lots of little chicken bones. So that was the snack food, the preferred snack food. Also, they sold like little memorabilia for certain gladiators. I mean, you have to think about the way we behave at stadiums today. Almost it's the same, you know. Humanity doesn't change. If that's the one thing I've learned being a tour guide for 20 years, humanity is the same. It's just a different day. Va bene. So one other thing I wanted to show you on this side, and it's something that you probably have missed if you come here, is I want to show you this hill. This is the Colosseum. So this is one of the little hills of Rome, but it's not a hill necessarily, because if you could dig through that wall right over there, you'd end up inside a palace. Because over in this park, underground, is the palace of Nero. So Nero, of course, was the crazy emperor. He lived in the 60s AD, so after Augustus, but way before Constantine, and before the building of the Colosseum. He built himself the craziest big palace, and it's actually kind of a mysterious thing if you visit it, because it wasn't meant to be a house. There's no bedrooms, and nobody can quite figure out exactly what it was meant for, but the guess is that it was meant to be like a kind of an entertainment space, like a party palace. The Domus Aurea, the Golden House, was so big that they tore down neighborhoods of Rome to accommodate its size, and it became sort of the symbol of the decadence of the Roman emperors and how outrageous the situation, particularly with Nero, had become. So you can actually tour it. It's one of my very favorite things. I've written about it on my blog. It's an incredible underground experience. They have a virtual reality piece of it where you can see what it looked like. But I just want to take you up here to where it is so you can kind of understand. If you've never been here, or even if you have, there's hidden treasures everywhere in Rome. So that ambulance is passing. Before we leave the Colosseum, I just wanted to point up here at this funny little bookend. I've always really enjoyed this little bookend because my impression the first time I came here in the 90s was that the restorers got to this end, and then once they got here, they sort of did a poor job. You know, look how the stones are falling down here and falling down here. They sort of lost interest and they didn't put it together the right way. Actually, as it turns out, they did that on purpose. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in there so you can see. Look how this one is not, those are not right. They look like they're about to fall down. It was done with sort of artistic license, I guess you could say. Nobody would restore a building this way now. Nobody would do that. And in fact, when they restored the Colosseum just a couple of years ago, they decided that instead of doing power washing or something that would turn the Colosseum back to its original white, they would leave it having this sort of beige tone. Because you can see some parts are white, but some parts have, the stone is not perfectly clean. It's because the stone has chemically changed to have that color. So these days, the idea is not to do funny restorations like this. I mean, that's a visual joke. Think about that. It looks like it's falling apart there. So some restorer had a big sense of humor and thought that was funny. But these days, what you want to do is just clean what you find just the way it is and then leave it alone. So that's why the Colosseum today, it is brand new restored, but it looks a little dirty. It's just that that's the color that the travertine has after 2,000 years. I certainly won't look that good after 2,000 years, so I'm not going to judge. All right, I'm going to cross over here just to show you the entrance to the Colosseum and the Gladiator School zone. So the Colosseum is right here. So if you look beyond those pillars there, behind that tree, that's essentially where the entrance to the Domus Aurea is. Now the funny thing is, on top of this hill here, you have to imagine underneath that is a huge cavernous palace. It's really impressive and huge. But on top, if you walk into the park, you see ruins on top. And that was because a later emperor, Trajan, decided to not just destroy the Domus Aurea, but fill it in and build baths, public baths on top. So repurposing the Domus Aurea as foundations. And that actually ended up being a good thing for us as modern people, because when he did that, they just simply filled in the Domus Aurea. They didn't fully destroy it. And then they reused the walls. So now modern restorers have been able to go in there, pull out all that extra debris, and then they were able to open that up as a site. So it's one ruin here and another ruin here. And that's why we talk about Rome as like a layer cake or an onion, because there's so many things below, but even the things built on top of those are old. So it's an impossible thing to fully understand Rome unless you come here. So here's that gladiator school that I mentioned. So you can see that these are barracks, and they have, it looks like a little arena. Do you see how it's a little bit like a semicircle over there? So probably that was like a practice arena, and all of those buildings over there that were built in later times, if you wipe those away, you would have this be a much bigger complex that all fed into tunnels that went across the street to the entrance to the Colosseum. So from here you can see a little bit of the Roman Forum as well, and down into Piazza Venezia. So that's just a little mini tour. I'll just go ahead and pop a few of these up on my Facebook page today for you guys to enjoy. And you can sort of pretend to be traveling with me. There's a question, am I a guide for the Rome City Tour? I do guide here in Rome. I do offer tours. Next year, on my own, grand. I don't know what's happening with Rick Steves. We don't know what tours are going to be offered next year. But for my own Adventures with Sarah tours, I will be doing probably 2 separate weeks, 7-day tours of Rome, where we're going to investigate Rome that's a little lesser known. And I'm working with my friend Susanna Peruchini to maybe create a tour that goes to the outskirts, to the Castelli Romani, to Castel Gandolfo, or Castel Gandolfo, just because there's a lot of things here that you can see in Rome that if you've been here once, you've missed. I've been coming to this city for 25 years. This is actually right now, this month, is the anniversary of when I lived in Rome 25 years ago as an architecture student. And in all these years, I haven't seen it all. And I don't think I want to see it all. I think I want to leave things so that I always have something to come back to. But if you're interested in investigating Rome in a little bit more serious way, I promise in the next month or 2, I'll have some dates up for you, probably in June next year, if you'd like to join me to investigate Rome more deeply. Not just the touristic stuff, not the Colosseum and the Vatican, but the churches, the archaeological sites you haven't heard of. There's so much to do. So who knows? Andiamo. Come along with me and we'll have some fun. So I'll talk to you a little bit later and keep putting up a little bit of virtual travel for your Friday so you can feel like you have left your home and you can be here with me. I think now I'm going to head over to San Clemente and light a candle that travel will resume next spring, because I miss you guys and I wish that I had my group with me. So anyway, talk to you later. Ciao.